Ethan Vale was used to quiet days. He worked as a junior engineer on Orion Station 12, a small human outpost orbiting a dull gray moon in a forgotten corner of space. His job was simple: maintain the life support systems, repair broken panels, and make sure the coffee machine never stopped working. Nothing exciting ever happened here. At least, that's what he thought. It was a slow morning when the message came. The station's comms console beeped, and a pale blue envelope icon blinked on the screen. Ethan frowned. No one sent personal messages to Orion 12. Most official. Orders went to Commander Harkins, not to engineers like him. Still, curiosity won. He tapped the icon. The message unfolded as a shimmering projection in front of him. Words formed in silver light. To Ethan Vale, human engineer of Orion Station 12. You are cordially invited to attend the Grand Convergence of Empires, hosted by the Royal House of Kareth on the world of Netheris. Your presence has been personally requested. Ethan blinked. What now? He muttered. The Grand Convergence was a diplomatic event he'd only heard about in news feeds. It was where leaders of dozens of alien civilizations gathered every few years to sign treaties, form alliances, and eat strange food no human chef would dare to prepare. It was not the kind of event where a random human engineer was invited. Usually, only ambassadors, high-ranking officials, or decorated heroes went there. He scrolled down. There was more. Transport has been arranged. Attendance is required. Formal attire will be provided upon arrival. Required? Ethan raised an eyebrow. That sounded less like an invitation and more like an order. Still, something about the message felt strange. Who would personally request him? He had never even spoken to an alien dignitary before. The most exotic thing he'd dealt with was a faulty oxygen filter from a mining ship crewed by Martian settlers. Before he could think too much, Commander Harkins walked into the comms room. The tall, broad-shouldered officer glanced at the projection, then at Ethan. You got the message, Harkins said. It wasn't a question. You knew about this? Ethan asked. Orders came in last night. A Kareth Royal courier ship is en route. You leave in 3 hours. 3 hours? Sir, I don't even own formal clothes. Harkins gave a short laugh. You won't need your own. The Kareth are very particular. They'll dress you themselves. That did not make Ethan feel better. 3 hours later, Ethan stood on the docking bay, staring at the sleek silver vessel that had just arrived. It was shaped like a crescent moon, with glowing lines tracing patterns across its hull. The air around it seemed to shimmer, like heat on desert sand. The ship's ramp lowered without a sound, and 2 tall figures descended. They were Carithians, a species Ethan had only seen in holo pictures. Their bodies were slender but strong, covered in soft, feather-like scales that shifted colors with the light. Their long necks supported angular faces with sharp eyes and a faint crest of plumage. One of them stepped forward. Ethan Vale? The voice was melodic but carried authority. That's me, Ethan said, trying to sound calm. I am Vera, Royal Envoy of Her Highness, Princess Arasha. You will accompany us to Netheris. The envoy's tone left no room for argument. Ethan glanced at Harkins, who only gave him a shrug as if to say, Don't look at me. Taking a deep breath, Ethan followed the envoys up the ramp. Inside, the ship was quiet and filled with soft golden light. The air smelled faintly of something floral, though he couldn't name the scent. He was shown to a seat that molded perfectly to his shape the moment he sat down. The journey to Netheris was faster than he expected. The Kareth ship slipped into a silent hyperspace corridor, and within hours they were approaching the planet. From space, Netheris was breathtaking, a world of deep oceans and emerald continents, with swirling clouds that sparkled faintly as if they were laced with crystal dust. As the ship descended, Ethan saw massive towers that seemed to grow out. of the ground like living trees. Bridges of glass connected them, and flocks of luminous creatures soared between the spires. They landed at the base of the largest tower, where a wide platform overlooked the glittering city. Waiting there was a group of Kareth attendants who immediately guided Ethan toward a preparation chamber. Without a word, they began dressing him in flowing silver and blue garments embroidered with star patterns. The fabric was light but warm, and it moved as if it had a mind of its own. When they were finished, a pair of golden wristbands were placed on him. "Symbols of honored guest," one attendant explained. "They will open all doors in the royal halls." Ethan barely had time to take this in before he was escorted into the Grand Convergence Hall. It was like walking into another universe. The hall stretched so high it seemed to fade into the sky itself. The floor was polished crystal, reflecting the glow of hovering light orbs. Around him, beings of every shape and color moved in elegant patterns. Towering reptilians in ceremonial armor, floating jelly-like creatures in shimmering shells, humanoids with wings of living fire. Ethan felt completely out of place. He kept his head down, trying not to trip over the flowing hem of his clothes. He just needed to survive the night without embarrassing himself or Earth. Then, everything stopped. A hush fell over the hall. Conversations died. Dozens of alien eyes turned toward him. Confused, Ethan glanced up. On the highest balcony, framed by two tall figures wearing golden crowns, stood a young Kareth woman. Her feather scales shifted through shades of sapphire and silver, and her eyes were a deep, almost glowing blue. She was beautiful in a way that felt more like art than nature. Perfect symmetry, graceful lines, and a presence that made the air itself seem to still. The king and queen of Kareth stood beside her, but it was the princess who was looking at him. Not at the ambassadors, not at the galaxy's leaders, him. And then she spoke. "I want him." Her voice was clear and calm, but it carried across the hall like a bell. The translator embedded in Ethan's ear confirmed he'd heard it right. She turned to her parents. "I choose him." Ethan froze. His mind went blank. Every alien in the room was staring at him, waiting for something. A word, a movement, anything. But he couldn't even blink. What had he just walked into? The hall stayed silent after the princess spoke. Ethan could feel hundreds of eyes on him, some curious, some shocked, some angry. He wasn't sure which made him more nervous. Up on the balcony, the king and queen of Kareth turned toward their daughter. They spoke to her in their native tongue, their voices calm but sharp, like two streams of water flowing in opposite directions. Ethan's translator picked up only a few words. Choice. Human. Tradition. The princess stood firm, her gaze never leaving Ethan. Her eyes held a strange mix of certainty and... was that excitement? Before Ethan could think of what to do, the king raised one clawed hand. A pair of royal guards, tall, armored Kareth warriors, walked across the hall toward him. Their scales shimmered gold and green, and their long spears glowed faintly at the tips. "Human," one guard said in a deep, even voice. "The royal house requests your presence in their private chambers. You will follow us." Ethan swallowed, hard. "Do I have a choice?" The guard tilted his head as if confused by the question. "Refusing would be unusual." That didn't sound good. The walk to the private chambers felt like a dream, or maybe a trap. Ethan followed the guards through corridors lined with tall crystal windows. Outside, the alien city glittered in the evening light. The sky was filled with soft pink clouds, and flocks of flying creatures drifted between the towers. Inside, the walls glowed faintly, as if light itself lived in them. Every so often, other guests passed by, dignitaries and warriors from other worlds, and each one gave him a long, curious look. Finally, the guards stopped at a large set of silver doors. They opened without a sound, revealing a round room lit by gentle golden light. Plush cushions and curved seats were arranged in a circle, and at the far side, the king, queen, and princess waited. The princess was seated on a low, throne-like chair. Up close, Ethan could see the fine detail of her feather scales. Every one of them shimmered with a natural iridescence, like polished stone in sunlight. The king spoke first. His voice was deep and calm. "Human Ethan Vale, you have been chosen by my daughter, Princess Arasha." Ethan raised his hand slightly. "Chosen? For what exactly?" The queen's eyes softened. "Our customs are complex to outsiders, but the simplest truth is this. She wishes you to be her bond companion." Ethan frowned. "Bond companion? Does that mean marriage?" The translator hesitated on the word, then answered, "Partnership. With deep personal and political meaning." "That is the closest human word," the queen said. "It is not a simple union. It is a role of great trust, influence, and responsibility." Ethan stared. "With all respect, your majesties." "Why me? I'm just an engineer. I fix broken machines. I've never even met your daughter before today." The princess finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I have read of humans, studied them, watched your transmissions. You are a young species, but you are unpredictable. That is what my people need." Ethan blinked. "Unpredictable?" "Yes," she said simply. "Our enemies are cunning, but they plan for every move. They cannot plan for you." That sounded like a compliment, and also like a dangerous job description. Ethan took a slow breath. "Look, I'm honored, but this feels like something I should have a choice in." The king nodded gravely. "You do have a choice, but know this. If you refuse, it may be seen as a great insult to the royal house and to the Kareth people." "An insult?" "Yes," the queen said gently. "Our traditions are older than your world's history. To be chosen is a rare honor." Ethan's mind raced. If he said no, would he be escorted out politely, or quietly disappear into some alien prison? If he said yes, what exactly was he agreeing to? He started, but before he could finish, a faint vibration trembled through the floor. The princess looked toward the ceiling, her eyes narrowing. "That is not part of the convergence ceremony." A moment later, a sharp alarm tone echoed through the halls. The golden light in the room shifted to deep red. The king stood quickly. "Guards! Secure the chamber!" Two armored warriors stepped forward, but the princess was already moving toward a hidden panel in the wall. She pressed her hand to it, and the panel slid aside, revealing a narrow passage lit by soft blue strips. She turned to Ethan. "Come with me." Ethan hesitated. "What's happening?" "Not here," she said. "We are being attacked." "Attacked? By who?" The princess glanced toward her parents. "Rival factions. They wish to take the throne. If they succeed, the convergence will fall into chaos." Ethan's voice was tight. "And what does that have to do with me?" Her eyes met his. "More than you know. But if you want to live, follow me now." Ethan followed her into the narrow corridor. The walls here were plain metal, unlike the decorated halls outside. The sound of footsteps and distant shouting echoed through the passage. The princess moved quickly, her long strides surprisingly fast. "You are safer with me than with anyone else here," she said without looking back. "That's not very reassuring," Ethan muttered. They turned a corner and emerged into a small chamber with a wide window overlooking the city. Outside, bright flashes lit the sky, explosions, and strange pulses of light that seemed to distort the air. "They're already inside the city," the princess said grimly. Ethan's hands curled into fists. He had no weapon, no armor, and no idea how to fight alien rebels. But something in her voice made him believe she wasn't going to let them catch either of them without a fight. A sharp, metallic thud came from the far wall. The princess stepped in front of Ethan, her hand going to a small device at her waist. It unfolded into a sleek, curved blade that shimmered like liquid silver. The wall split open and two insectoid creatures stepped through. They were taller than Ethan, with jointed limbs and black, glossy armor that looked grown rather than built. Their eyes glowed a cold green. One of them hissed in a language the translator didn't recognize. The princess lowered her stance. "Stay behind me!" Ethan didn't need to be told twice. The first creature lunged, but the princess moved like lightning. Her blade met its strike with a ringing note, then swept in a clean arc that sent the alien stumbling back. The second attacker tried to flank her, but she twisted aside, driving her weapon into the gap in its armor. Both creatures collapsed to the floor. The princess didn't even breathe hard. Ethan stared. "Remind me never to make you angry." She didn't smile. "We need to move. This was only the first wave." She pressed her hand to the wall, and another hidden panel slid open, revealing yet another corridor. Ethan stepped through after her, his mind spinning with questions about the attack, about why she'd chosen him, and about what exactly he had gotten himself into. Somehow he had the feeling the answers weren't going to make his life any easier. Hook. Behind them, somewhere deep in the palace, a massive explosion shook the ground, and the princess whispered, "They've breached the throne hall." The narrow passage trembled under the shock of the distant explosion. Dust drifted from the ceiling, and the golden light strips flickered for a moment before returning to their steady glow. Ethan tried to keep up with the princess, but his legs were starting to ache. "Is there anywhere safe in this place?" he asked between breaths. Princess Arasha didn't slow. "Not while the rebels control part of the palace. They've breached the throne hall. That means they will try to take my parents." Ethan's heart tightened. "And what about you?" "I'm their real prize," she said without looking back. "If they capture me alive, they can claim the crown in my name." Ethan's voice went dry. "That's bad. Very," she agreed. The corridor ended at a small circular room with walls of smooth white stone. In the center stood a pedestal with a crystal sphere glowing faintly blue. Arasha stepped up to it and placed her hand on the surface. The sphere's glow brightened, and a shimmering image appeared. A map of the palace. Red marks blinked where the rebels had already taken control. The map looked like it had been splattered with red ink. "They're moving faster than I expected," she said, studying the glowing patterns. "We have one path left that might get us to the command gallery." Ethan peered at the map. "And that's where the good guys are?" Her lips curved slightly. "Yes, the good guys. But it's also where we can access the palace's internal defense systems." "That sounds useful," Ethan admitted. She turned to him then, her expression serious. "Ethan, if I can get to those systems, I can lock the rebels out of every secure area. But to do it, I'll need your help." Ethan blinked. "My help? Princess, I think you've mistaken me for someone with combat training." "This isn't about fighting," she said. "It's about machines. You repair systems. You understand how they work." Ethan hesitated. "I fix broken filters and faulty power relays. That's not the same as hacking an alien palace defense grid." "It's similar enough," she said, stepping closer. "The palace's defenses are centuries old. Much of the technology is older than my reign, even older than my parents'. It doesn't respond well to Kareth engineers who rely only on tradition. It might respond better to someone who thinks differently. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Let me guess. Someone unpredictable. Her eyes glimmered faintly. Exactly. The princess traced a route on the map, and the glowing lines shifted to mark a path. We'll have to pass through the Sky Tower bridges. They're exposed. If the rebels control them, we'll be easy targets. That's encouraging, Ethan muttered. Arasha gave him a sharp glance. Would you rather wait for them to find us here? No. Let's go. They moved quickly through more corridors, then emerged into the Sky Tower bridge. Ethan froze at the sight. The bridge stretched like a ribbon of glass between two enormous towers, high above the city. It was transparent beneath their feet, and the dizzying drop made his stomach twist. The sky around them was filled with drifting light creatures and faint trails of glowing airships. But the beauty lasted only a second. At the far end of the bridge, 3 insectoid rebels stepped into view, their green eyes glowing in the dim light. They've already taken this section, Arasha said quietly. The rebels saw them and began to advance, their sharp claws tapping. Against the glass floor, Ethan's mind raced. There was no cover here, nowhere to hide. But he noticed something, thin, glowing conduits running along the sides of the bridge. Those lights, he said quickly, are they part of the bridge's stabilizer system? Yes, Arasha replied, tense. Why? Because if we cut power to one side, the whole bridge will tilt. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with thought. It would throw them off balance, but we would be in danger too. Better than walking straight into their claws, Ethan said. The rebels broke into a run. Arasha didn't hesitate. She reached into a panel at the side of the bridge, exposing a cluster of glowing strands. Tell me which one, she demanded. Ethan's eyes scanned the tangled colors. He spotted the faint flicker in one of the lines, a sign of uneven current. That one! She yanked it free. The bridge tilted sharply, sending the rebels stumbling toward the edge. One lost their footing entirely and slid toward the drop, clawing at the glass before vanishing into the open air. The other 2 caught themselves but moved slower, struggling to balance. Run! Arasha shouted. They sprinted across the bridge. Ethan's legs burned and his breath came hard, but adrenaline kept him moving. The rebels tried to follow, but the tilt forced them to crawl, giving Ethan and Arasha the lead. They reached the safety of the far tower, and Arasha slammed her hand against a wall panel. The bridge re-leveled and sealed itself with a shimmer of energy. That was unpleasant, Ethan said, trying not to look back at the dizzying drop. You did well, Arasha said simply. Inside the tower, they descended a winding stairwell and entered a wide hall lined with statues of Kareth rulers. At the far end, a heavy metal door waited. 2 royal guards were posted there, both looking tense. The guards bowed quickly to Arasha. Your Highness, one said, we feared the worst. I am alive, she replied, thanks to my companion. She gestured toward Ethan. The guards gave him curious, measuring looks. Ethan tried to look like someone who belonged there. They opened the door, revealing the command gallery, a large room filled with glowing consoles and a wide central table projecting a 3-dimensional image of the palace. Arasha moved to the main console, but it refused to respond to her touch. Locked, she muttered. The rebels have overridden the royal access codes. Ethan stepped forward, studying the strange controls. Can I try? Arasha nodded. Do whatever. You can. He placed his hands on the surface. The interface felt strange, more like touching water than solid glass. Symbols shifted and swirled beneath his fingers. This system is weird, Ethan muttered. But I think I can trick it into thinking I'm part of the maintenance network instead of royal command. Do it, Arasha urged. Minutes passed. As Ethan worked, sweat beading on his forehead, the room shook once, twice, distant impacts from the fighting. Then finally, the console gave a soft chime. A new set of controls bloomed into view, glowing bright gold. "You did it," Arasha said, a rare smile touching her lips. Ethan quickly locked down several key areas of the palace. Doors sealed, energy, fields rose, and red zones on the map began to shrink. But before they could celebrate, the map flashed a warning. The rebels had bypassed the palace defenses and were heading straight for the command gallery. Hook. Arasha turned to Ethan, her expression sharp. "They know we're here, and they're bringing their best." The command gallery trembled with the sound of distant impacts. Ethan's fingers froze above the glowing console. "Did you say they're bringing their best?" Princess Arasha didn't look away from the palace map. "Yes, elite shock troopers. They are faster, stronger, and trained for one purpose, to end fights quickly." "That's very comforting," Ethan muttered. She turned to the two guards at the door. "Hold the entrance for as long as you can. If they get in here before we escape, it's over." The guards saluted, their armor shimmering under the golden lights. Arasha grabbed Ethan's wrist. "We have to move now. There's another way out of this tower, the upper sky bridge. It connects to the Spire of Winds." Ethan frowned. "The upper sky bridge? Isn't that the one that's really high?" "It's the fastest route left," she said. "And it's harder for them to reach us there. Unless they fly." "Can they fly?" "Some," she admitted. Ethan groaned. "Of course." They left the command gallery through a narrow service corridor. The air smelled faintly metallic, and the floor hummed with the vibration of the palace's energy systems. Somewhere far below, the muffled thud of explosions continued. As they climbed a spiral stairwell, Ethan noticed small slits in the outer wall that revealed glimpses of the city outside. Nytheris at night was stunning. The towers shone like silver spears, and the air was filled with drifting ships shaped like birds. But the beauty was marred by distant flashes of combat. "They're everywhere," Ethan whispered. "Yes," Arasha said, "which is why we must keep moving." They emerged into a glass-walled walkway, the upper sky bridge. It stretched, far above the city, so high the wind made the structure tremble ever so slightly. Ethan swallowed hard. "Why does it have to be see-through?" Arasha didn't answer. She was looking ahead, her eyes narrowing. "We're not alone." At the far end of the bridge, 3 figures stood waiting. They were different from the insectoid rebels Ethan had seen before. These were taller, their armor a dark crimson that seemed to drink in the light. Each carried a long, curved weapon that glowed faintly at the edge. "They are Veyrak blades," Arasha said softly, "trained to kill without hesitation." The blades began to advance, their movements precise and in perfect unison. Ethan glanced at Arasha. "Any chance we can talk to them?" "No," she said simply. "They were sent to end us." The princess drew her silver blade. "Stay behind me." The first blade charged, moving so fast Ethan barely saw it. Arasha's blade met, theirs in a shower of sparks. The sound of the clash echoed through the glass bridge like a bell. Ethan backed away, trying to stay out of reach, but the second blade shifted toward him. Panic flared. He had no weapon, no armor. Thinking fast, Ethan spotted the same glowing conduits along the bridge walls that he had seen earlier. He ran to them, pulling open a panel. His hands searched the tangle of cables until he found the stabilizer line. The second blade lunged, but before it could reach him, Ethan yanked the line free. The bridge tilted sharply. The sudden shift made the blade stumble, crashing into the transparent wall. The wind outside roared through a thin crack in the glass. Arasha used the distraction to drive her blade into the first attacker's side, sending them collapsing to the floor. The third blade hesitated, then leapt high, trying to clear the tilt. Arasha spun and met the strike, their weapons locking in a blinding flash. Ethan struggled to hold onto the cables as the bridge swayed. "Princess, I can't keep it like this much longer." "Then don't," she said, pushing her opponent back. Ethan shoved the cable back into place. The bridge leveled instantly, catching the remaining blade off balance just enough for Arasha to strike a clean blow. The last attacker crumpled. Arasha's breathing was steady, though her eyes were sharp. "You're learning," she said. Ethan exhaled shakily. "I'd rather not keep learning like this." They hurried across the rest of the bridge and entered the Spire of Winds, a tall, open chamber filled with moving air currents. Transparent lifts floated in mid-air, drifting between platforms like bubbles on invisible streams. Ethan stared. Is that safe?" "Yes," Arasha said, stepping into one of the lifts. "As long as you don't fall." "That's reassuring," he muttered, following her in. The lift rose quickly, the city spreading out beneath them like a sea of lights. From up here, Ethan could see entire districts glowing in different colors, connected by flowing rivers and airborne roads. It would have been breathtaking if not for the occasional flashes of battle. Halfway up, Arasha spoke quietly. "Ethan, I didn't choose you by accident." He glanced at her. "I figured as much." "I've been watching human transmissions for years," she continued. "Your people are unlike any others we know. You adapt. You surprise. You make decisions no algorithm can predict. That is what I need beside me. Not just for survival tonight, but for what is coming." "And what is coming?" Ethan asked. She looked out over the city. "A war my people cannot win alone." The lift reached the top platform where another corridor waited. But as they stepped forward, the platform shook violently. A dark shape swept past the glass wall. A rebel airship, sleek and armed. "They're trying to cut us off," Arasha said. "Any chance we can outrun an airship?" Ethan asked. "Yes," she said, "if we reach the wind channels." They dashed down the corridor and into a wide balcony where several small skimmer craft were docked. The skimmers were open, shaped like narrow wings with control panels at the front. Arasha jumped into one and gestured for Ethan to follow. "Hold on!" The skimmer shot forward, diving into a narrow current of rushing air between towers. Ethan gripped the edge as the city blurred past in streaks of silver and gold. The rebel airship turned to follow, its weapons glowing. "They're gaining!" Ethan shouted. "Not for long," Arasha replied, pulling the skimmer into a steep climb. The airship tried to match the maneuver, but the tight wind channel forced it to slow. They burst out above the city into the open sky. Ahead, another spire loomed, smaller but bristling with antennae and signal dishes. "That's our destination," Arasha said. "The signal tower. From there, I can reach allies outside the palace." As they approached, Ethan glanced back. The airship had found another route and was closing in fast. "Princess, we're not going to make it before—" A sudden beam of light lanced out from the spire, striking the airship's wing. The rebel craft spun, smoking, before vanishing. Behind a distant tower, Ethan blinked. "What was that?" Arasha smiled faintly. "Friends. We're not alone in this fight." The skimmer landed on the spire's upper deck. Arasha stepped off first, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We have a moment, but not long. The rebels will regroup." Ethan followed, still catching his breath. "So what now?" "Now," she said, turning toward a locked hatch, "we send a message that will change everything. Hook." She placed her hand on the hatch's scanner and it opened with a hiss, revealing a figure inside who Ethan had never expected to see. The hatch slid open with a soft hiss. Ethan stepped back as a tall figure emerged from the dim interior. The newcomer wore light silver armor, dented in places but clearly made for speed and movement. A deep blue cloak hung over one shoulder, and a curved weapon rested at their side. When the figure removed their helmet, Ethan saw a face lined with age and experience. A Kareth male, his feather scales faded to pale gray. "Captain Rain," Arasha said, a rare note of relief in her voice. The captain bowed slightly. "Your Highness, I feared the worst when the palace alarm sounded." "You feared correctly," Arasha replied. "The rebels have taken much of the palace. My parents are in danger. We must move quickly." Rain's eyes shifted to Ethan. "And this is—" "My chosen companion," Arasha said without hesitation. "He has already saved my life more than once tonight." The captain studied Ethan for a long moment, then nodded. "If you trust him, that's enough for me." Ethan exhaled quietly. "Glad we're skipping the part where you don't believe in me." Inside the Spire's control room, Rain activated a secure terminal. "We still have a few communication channels the rebels haven't cut," he explained. "I can send a signal to loyal forces in the city." Arasha stepped forward. "Do it. Tell them to converge on the throne hall. That's where the rebels will try to make their final claim." Ethan frowned. "And we're going there too?" "Yes," Arasha said. "If they take my parents, they can force me to surrender. The rebellion would be over in one night." Rain gave her a sharp look. "The hall will be heavily guarded. They'll expect you to try this." "They'll expect me," she said. "They won't expect him." She gestured toward Ethan. Ethan blinked. "Wait. I'm the plan?" Minutes later, they were airborne again in the small skimmer. This time, Rain piloted, taking them through narrow wind channels and across open sky. The city below was still, alive with light, but pockets of smoke and fire marked where fighting had spread. Ethan gripped the side rail. "What's our actual plan once we reach the throne hall?" "You'll find out," Arasha said simply. "That's not reassuring," he muttered. The skimmer landed on a high balcony of the palace, far from the main entrances. Rain led them inside through a maintenance shaft, their footsteps echoing softly. The air smelled faintly of dust and old metal. They emerged into a long corridor lit by tall crystal lamps. At the far end stood two massive doors carved with the Kareth royal crest, the entrance to the throne hall. Through the faint crack between the doors, Ethan could see movement inside. Shadows of tall, armored rebels shifted against the golden light. "They've taken the center of the hall," Rain whispered. "I count at least a dozen." Arasha's voice was firm. "We'll divide their attention." The princess and the captain slipped to one side of the corridor, moving toward a side entrance. Ethan was left crouched near the main doors, his pulse thundering in his ears. A sharp signal came through his wristband. One blink of green light. That was the cue. Ethan shoved the main doors wide, stepping into the grand throne hall. The space was massive, its floor gleaming like liquid gold. High banners of deep blue and silver hung from the walls, swaying faintly in the air currents. At the far end, the king and queen were seated on the twin thrones, but both were bound with shining energy restraints. Around them stood the crimson-armored blades, their weapons drawn. The lead rebel turned at the sound of the doors. "A human?" His voice was distorted by his helmet, dripping with disbelief. Ethan raised his hand slowly. Hi. I think there's been some kind of mistake." The lead rebel strode forward, weapon ready. "Not at all. You are bait. The princess will come for you." Right on cue, the side doors burst open. Arasha and Rain charged in, blades flashing. The hall erupted into chaos. Ethan dove behind a tall column as the clash of steel and the hiss of energy weapons filled the air. Arasha's silver blade moved like a streak of light, each strike precise and forceful. Rain fought with slower, heavier blows, knocking attackers aside with sheer power. The rebels tried to close ranks around the thrones, but Ethan noticed something. A panel near the base of the dais was slightly open, faint wires exposed. His engineer's instincts kicked in. If he could access that panel, maybe he could disable the restraints holding the king and queen. Keeping low, Ethan crawled along the edge of the hall. The noise of battle masked his movement. He reached the panel and pulled it open fully, revealing a tangle of glowing conduits. The design was unfamiliar, but he recognized the basic principle: a closed energy loop maintaining a magnetic hold. He yanked one cable free, then another. Sparks flew, and the restraints flickered. One final twist of a connector, and the energy bands dissolved. The king rose immediately, his presence commanding even after being restrained. The queen stood beside him, her eyes sharp. "You freed us," she said. "Not just me," Ethan replied, glancing toward Arasha. The king's voice was deep and powerful. "Then let us finish this." The tide of the battle shifted fast, with the king and queen fighting. Beside them, Arasha and Rain pressed the rebels hard. One by one, the crimson-armored blades fell or were forced to retreat. The lead rebel saw the fight turning and shouted for withdrawal. The remaining rebels pulled back toward the far doors, but before leaving, the leader pointed at Ethan. "This isn't over, human. You've made yourself part of this war." Then they were gone, vanishing into the corridors beyond. Silence settled over the hall, broken only by the distant sounds of fighting elsewhere in the palace. Arasha walked to Ethan, her expression unreadable. For a moment, then she smiled faintly. "You did more than survive tonight. You stood with us." Ethan shook his head. "I just pulled a few wires." "Sometimes," the king said, stepping closer, "that is all it takes to change the course of a battle." The queen rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "The rebellion is not over, but tonight you've dealt it a heavy blow." Arasha's gaze stayed on Ethan. "And you understand now why I chose you. It was never just about tradition. It was about finding someone who could see solutions where others see walls." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I'm starting to see what you mean, but I'm still not sure I'm ready for this." "You will be," she said quietly. Outside the hall, the sound of loyal guards approaching grew louder. Reinforcements were arriving to secure the palace. But even with this victory, Ethan could feel it. The war was far from over. Hook. Far above the city, a rebel warship drifted into orbit, its shadow falling over Netheris. Somewhere on that ship, the lead rebel's voice echoed in the darkness. "Bring me the human." The rebel warship hung above the city like a dark moon. From the palace balcony, Ethan could see its jagged outline against the silver-blue sky. It was bigger than any vessel he had seen before, shaped like a spear pointed straight at the heart of Netheris. Around him, the royal guards moved quickly, reinforcing the walls and setting up energy shields. The king stood at the edge of the balcony, speaking quietly with his commanders. The queen was already sending orders to loyal forces across the planet. Ethan gripped the balcony railing. "That ship looks very not friendly." Arasha stepped beside him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "It carries the last of the rebel leaders. They will try one final strike before fleeing the system." Ethan swallowed. "And they're after me. They believe taking you will break our alliance," she said. "Or perhaps they simply want revenge." The king turned toward Ethan. "We have two options. We can hide you deep within the palace, protected by our strongest guards, or—" His gaze was steady. "You can help us draw them out." Ethan frowned. "Draw them out? How?" "By being visible," Arasha said. "By making them think. They have a chance to take you. We can use that to trap them." Ethan let out a shaky laugh. "So I'm the bait again. Great." Rain, who had joined them, rested a hand on his weapon. "If you agree, I will not let them reach you." Ethan looked at each of them: the king, the queen, the captain, and Arasha. His life had changed so much in just a short time. He had come here expecting to be a quiet observer at a grand event. Now he was part of a war. He took a deep breath. All right, let's do it. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in practice. Ethan would stand in the open courtyard, surrounded by guards but seemingly vulnerable. The rebels would deploy ground troops to capture him, and the loyalists would spring the trap. The courtyard was vast, lined with tall crystal columns that shimmered under the strange alien sun. Ethan stood in the center, trying not to fidget. The guards kept a discreet distance, blending into the shadows. Above, the warship's shadow grew darker. A sudden ripple of air made the hair on his neck stand up. 6 rebel dropships broke through the clouds, engines screaming. They descended fast, their landing struts slamming into the courtyard floor. The rebel leader stepped out first, his crimson armor gleaming. His voice rang out across the space. "Human, you will come with us!" Ethan forced himself to stand tall. "Not happening!" The leader gave a signal, and his soldiers surged forward. Energy weapons lit the air with blue streaks. Before they could reach Ethan, the shadows around the courtyard came alive. Loyal guards charged in, their blades flashing. The clash was loud, chaotic, the kind of noise that rattled the bones. Rain was at Ethan's side in an instant, blocking a strike aimed at his head. "Stay close!" Ethan ducked and moved with him, trying to keep out of the way but still aware of the bigger picture. He saw Arasha across the courtyard, moving like a silver storm through the enemy lines. The rebels were skilled, but they hadn't expected the trap. One by one, they began to fall back toward their dropships. The rebel leader shouted orders, clearly frustrated. His gaze locked on Ethan, and he charged forward, breaking through 2 guards to reach him. Ethan's instinct was to run, but Rain was faster. The captain met the leader head-on, their blades striking with a sound like ringing metal. Sparks flew with every hit. Ethan saw his chance. The leader's armor had an exposed control node near the side, probably for adjusting internal systems. He grabbed a fallen staff weapon from the ground and swung hard, striking the node. The armor's energy field flickered. Rain took the opening, disarming the leader and forcing him to his knees. The courtyard went silent except for the hum of the city's shields above. The last of the rebels had either been captured or fled back to the warship. The king stepped forward, looking down at the kneeling leader. "The rebellion ends here." Loyal guards took the prisoner away. The warship in the sky began to turn, engines flaring as it fled the system. Ethan exhaled, feeling his muscles finally relax. That night, the palace was alive with celebration. The people of Nitharus gathered in the great plaza, their voices rising. In song, lights filled the sky like streams of fireflies. Ethan stood on a balcony beside Arasha, watching the city glow. "You could return to Earth now," she said quietly. "You've done more than anyone could have asked." He hesitated. "And if I stayed?" Her eyes met his. "Then you would be part of our rebuilding. You would stand as a bridge between our people. It would not be easy, but it would be meaningful." Ethan thought of his quiet apartment back home, of the small routines he had once thought were enough. He thought of the danger, the fear, but also the strange beauty he had found here. Finally, he smiled faintly. "I think I'd miss the excitement." Arasha's expression softened. "Then stay. Not because I chose you, but because you choose us." The king and queen joined them, each placing a hand on his shoulders. "Ethan Vale," the king said, "from this day, you are the first human ambassador to the Kareth Dominion. May your voice speak for peace between our worlds." The crowd below erupted in cheers as Ethan stepped forward beside the royal family. Above the city, the stars stretched endlessly. 2 worlds now linked by a single choice. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan knew this was only the beginning of his story.